Perfect. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to our ISM webinar on Doclink with Altec. Presenting today is Ms. Perry Lynn Silkwood. With that, Perry Lynn, I'm going to turn everything over to you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Well, I'm sure excited to showcase Doclink for you today. And what I thought we would do is cover a couple different things. So here's our roadmap. I wanted to introduce Doclink to you and Altec as a company. I want to talk about some of the reasons why people consider document management. We'll introduce our product, and then we'll go through these kind of 4 or 5 functional areas that I think are really critical in providing true business benefits to an organization, and ultimately driving productivity and allowing for time savings, and also involving both hard and soft dollar cost savings. So this is kind of our roadmap for today, and then I have an offer for you as well that I'd love for you to take advantage of. So let's kind of just talk a little bit about Altec. I think it's important for you to know that Altec has been in business for a long, long period of time. Right? We are also the exclusive endorsed solution for document management for Sage, and that's really important. It was a competitive award. We have been validated by an external third party in terms of the integration that we have with Sage, and I think that that's really important to know as well. Plus, we have lots and lots of customers. Why is that important to you? Because you know that you'll be able to speak with a reference in your industry, how they're using Doclink, as well you know that those folks are contributing to the ongoing research and development of the product. So that's really important as well. All right, so I think we just have 1 or 2 participants out there, but let's see if we can do some chatting. So are you ready to do some chatting? We'll see if we can't do some trends, and I'll let you know what I've seen in other presentations as well. So let's now talk about why people consider document management, right? What are the goals? And so my thinking here is that if you can relate to any of these areas in a singular fashion, we should be talking. And of course, if you can relate to more than one of these items, then we should probably be talking more urgently, right? But here it is, top 9, right? If you are having a desire to eliminate moving paper between locations, you should probably consider document management, right? How about if you're wanting to speed up the entire AP invoice approval process? That can be quite compelling for organizations. You may be storing documents right now today in filing cabinets or off-site storage or on the warehouse floor, and you want your employees, right, to be able to have easier access to documents without calling someone, etc. That's a powerful reason to consider document management. How about if you are trying to reduce the square footage consumption in your office? If you want to eliminate filing cabinets, right, that's going to free up space for you. That would be powerful. Reducing data entry. This is really important as well, and we'll get into this element as we start talking about the possibilities of workflow. But you can reduce data entry. What does that mean for the organization? It's speeding up productivity and allowing you to have more time to go after more strategic initiatives like avoiding late fees or going after early pay discounts or spending time on more strategic tasks. Right? How about reducing courier fees? This is moving documents again between offices. And we talked a little bit about reducing physical file storage, right? Whether that's on-site in filing cabinets or off-site, etc. And then I always like this one too, and all the related prep time. So if I was to ask someone for a document, what does it mean to them? Do they have to go and find it, print it, scan it, email it? You know, is it easily accessible? And driving cost savings. So I think that with document management, there is a very tangible return on investment, or ROI, that can be calculated. And depending on where you are in your investigative stage, then we can certainly help you with that if you like. And improving audit here at the bottom. So if you've ever gone through an audit, you know the pain of having to produce documents, give them to the auditors, and then when you get those documents back, then you have the refiling routine as well. So what we're really talking about is easy access to documents. All right, So let's find out what are the top ones. So I'd be curious to know, and you can chat back to me if you like. If not, no worries. I'll still give you a trend analysis, but I'd be curious to know, chat back in the chat feature and let me know if there are certain ones here on this list, 1 through 9, that kind of speak to you more specifically. And I'll let you know what I'm finding in my other presentations. So top ones. Both before, yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let you know that I have unmuted Jason, so he doesn't need to use the chat. You guys can speak directly.
Oh, perfect. Hey, Jason, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too.
Thank you.
Am I the only one again?
It seems
you are
so.
my star pupil. Yes.
There's a theme this week.
Oh, nice. It's all about you, Jason. See? The universe talks to you. So just out of curiosity, Jason, in your world, are these, are any of these elements kind of like screaming for you to try and solve or address in the organization?
The biggest one is the whole effort of filing and kind of the audit, the filing, and really tracking records. One of the reasons we're looking at digitizing our documents is because we lost a number of them due to a facilities person who thought they were trash and they were stored in the warehouse.
Got it.
So,
yeah, you're speaking my language. So and you just nailed it, really, right? And that's one of the elements. But number 3, easier access. So yes, now you don't have access because they got accidentally, thrown out. But within moments, you can have documents at your fingertips, and we're going to go into that today. So, yay! I mean, not yay for you, but yay, you're in the right spot. And yes, we can help you. So let me give you kind of a quick introduction to Doclink, because our solution is really an enterprise-wide document management system. And not only is it able to store documents for easy retrieval, but you can route documents between employees through our workflow engine. You can send documents outside of the organization with our output automation tool. And you can actually even create documents that would ultimately potentially go through a workflow with our advanced business process tools called SmartForm Toolkit, and I'm going to showcase a couple different samples for you today. And the other nice thing is that depending on what Sage solution you own, there's a really nice tight package that will build on the Paperless Office functionality. Are you the Sage 100 user?
We are.
Okay. And are you using Paperless Office today?
No.
Okay. Actually, Perry Lynn, they are on an older version. We're going to be upgrading them, so he does not have access to Paperless Office at this time, but he soon will.
Okay, but you soon will. And you know what? Regardless of whether you're actively using Paperless Office or not, the functionality that I'm going to show you is still viable for you and would still be able to be used. But it's always nice if you're running Paperless Office because there's some extended functionality that you get to take advantage of as well, and I'll cover that for you. So let's talk about kind of one of the primary benefits, which is really using the system as an image repository. You can use different words for image repository, a document library, one single source, for documents, all sorts of different, words to express the same concept. But here's the primary benefits, right? So not only are there many, many ways to capture documents, because ultimately you want to make documents electronic if they're not already, right? But then what it's going to give you is that you'll have really documents at your fingertips. And the documents will be available based on security. So you'll know that only the people that need access or have been expressly given access would actually be able to search for those documents. And the second piece down here, powerful and flexible search criteria, or third element, if you will, that's really important because rather than going to a filing cabinet, which has that real linear way of looking for documents, now you can search for things by vendor, right, or by customer if you've stored customer documents. invoice number, GL account code, sub-GL account code, purchase order number, all of those data fields now become your search properties, and that gives you infinitely more flexibility as well. And then, of course, sure, you're going to save tons of time. So any time that's spent now filing documents, finding documents, refiling documents, replacing thrown out documents, putting documents on the warehouse floor, that all goes away because they're all stored electronically, and there are numerous ways of getting them into the system, which is what we're going to cover as well. And we've already talked about, easier time during your audit because now documents are more easily accessible. And here's the other cool thing is that you've got 2 different ways, actually there's 4 different ways really that you can access documents. There's 3 possibilities in Doclink, and then we also are deeply integrated with your Sage application, so you can view documents right within the Sage windows as well. So that's really compelling. Okay, here's what it looks like, right? So a little view. And let me introduce you to what you're seeing, and we can kind of go through this situation. So this here is what we call the Doclink Smart Client. It is our user interface. And quite simply, across the top here, we have Advanced Inquiry. This is where we can look for documents by company, by type, right? And then based on the type of documents, then we can refine our search by various properties here. And then these tabs across the top, workflow, index, batch, I'm going to go into those in a moment as well. But workflow is basically when we're routing documents between employees, and we've got some forms that I'm going to be talking about later on. But what you're seeing here on the screen is I'm telling the system, hey, for company ABC, I want to see AP invoice with invoice number 36. I can double-click my keyboard, and then what's going to happen are those documents that are bound together by invoice 36 are going to show up for me. And then what's even greater is that I can highlight this and drill in to see all documents that have that shared value of invoice number 36. And here they are here in this particular grid. And then I can highlight them and open them, and then here they are on the screen. So you're already hopefully getting that concept that within the most minimal amount of keystrokes, you can have quick and easy access right to the documents. And then if you want to, you can always email them right from here as well. So super, super fast. And if we go back, now you can extend the concept, right? So not only am I really talking about accounts payable documents, even though that's the example, but any document, any form, any file type can be stored in the system for easy access. And then here's a little bit of extra gravy. Oops, I went back instead of forward. Let's take a look at viewing them in Sage. So when you buy Doclink, then you get these 2 buttons kind of embedded in your screens, View Documents and Index. So what this means is that if I click on View Documents, the document that is related to this particular invoice transaction will show up for me, right? So it gives another really easy way of accessing the system. Just to extend that concept even further, there are several windows where we have that View Documents capability. So here's another one on vendor inquiry, and you see in this case we're seeing even more documents that have been, linked to that particular screen. Okay, so big value proposition here is easy access to documents, saving time on the filing, retrieving, refiling process, streamlining the audit process because you have easier access to documents, and no more sending documents off-site or to the warehouse floor.
So the big question is, how do you get documents in?
Yeah.
So you just gave an example of an AP invoice entry. Typically in today's world, I'll have an AP clerk sitting there with an invoice from a vendor, and she's going to go and vouch that against the PO. She has that in her hand. Let's say she has a scanner on her desktop. How does she add that into
Doclink?
How does she add it into Doclink, but also at the same time kind of create that link to the transaction she's doing?
And that's exactly where I'm going to go next. So that's a perfect question. Have impeccable timing. So, but to answer your question directly, normally invoices are coming in via email, and there is a module that basically takes the invoice and or the body of the email and sends it into workflow. And workflow is actually what we're going to be talking about, because workflow in our world is the mechanism by which we have, we're going to look at that document, we can do some notes on it, we can actually physically code it, we're also going to potentially route it for approval, and then when it comes back to AP, that is the moment that it's actually going to be brought into Sage. And there is an import tool that actually allows for that to take place. So so that was email, right? So there's an automatic import from email. If it's a hard copy document, then just as you were suggesting, we're going to have her scan it in, right, and then pull it into workflow. And workflow is really just this mechanism. It's kind of like inboxes, you know, as a metaphor for organizing work. But here's kind of like the benefits, right? Do you do approvals for your invoices now?
Yes, certain invoices get approved. Depends if they're against the PO or not.
Right, exactly. And if the PO matches, and they need to get reconciled, right? So all of this gets handled in workflow, and I'll kind of give you an idea. So before, right, we were working at advanced inquiry. Now I'm clicking on the workflow tab, and I'm actually the administrator for the system, so I get to see everybody's workflow, and that's important because I'm trying to show you many different things in a demo. But in my sample here, I've got an AP workflow, I've got a workflow that's set up for the CFO, and kind of by role here, just to kind of highlight. Now, AP is highlighted, and if you notice the status here, it says unprocessed. So we have these concept of statuses that allow for an invoice to come in. It's going to leave my workflow and go to someone else, probably the CFO in my example. It'll come back, and it'll come back to me as a different status, like approved or denied. And that way, not only can the AP clerk have a very nice, tight way of organizing their work, but you, as the supervisor, can also see what's flowing through everybody's workflow. Okay, so the whole big benefit here is now you've got complete visibility and control of the document and hence the transaction. So let's open it up and see. So I'm taking the role of the AP clerk, right? I'm looking at my workflow. Here I am. Here are all the documents that have been sent to me. I'm opening up the first one, and let's take a look at what we've got here. I'm going to start on the left, and we'll move to the right. So in this particular panel, I have an opportunity to approve, deny, or add information, right? At the top here, I can actually do some creative communication about this invoice. I can add a sticky note or drawing tools or highlight right on the face of this document if I wanted to, okay? It's just a way of communicating with the next person in the workflow. But as the AP clerk, I'm actually going to use this area here, which is called the GL distribution stamp, as a way of capturing the data about this particular invoice. Why? Because I want to know about this invoice as it's, you know, finding its way through the organization. In a manual environment, when I put these into an interoffice envelope or I put them on someone's desk, you have no visibility of that transaction. Now, you've got not only visibility of the transaction, but you know exactly what vendor it's for, what the amount is, what the GL account code is for it, and that way you've got better control of this transaction as well. Okay, now these pieces right here are already integrated with Sage, including the account information. Okay, so it's really nice. It's really just opening up the box, selecting, or if you do a partial type and tab, it's going to pull in the information as well. Ultimately, though, I'm going to lock that down for editing, unless, of course, your approving managers participate in coding, then I'd leave it open for editing. And then I'm going to decide where does this go next in the approval cycle. So you'll notice right up here, and there's a couple choices. Number one is I can choose from the drop-down box, where does this go next? There is also an opportunity to layer on automation if you wanted to use the data that was captured in the GL stamp in order to help facilitate the approval process. Okay, so off that's going to the CFO, right? Now, as the CFO, I have an opportunity to do just like we were talking about. Do I want to add any kind of approval stamp? Do I want to also do some communication here? Right, so lots of possibilities there. Just talking about different kinds of ways that you can alert someone that there's something in their workflow. The most prominent way is to actually have them get an email alert. The email alert looks just like I'm showing you here, although it's configurable. And it's really meant to just simply prompt someone to do the right thing. Hey, sign into the system, you know what, and take care of your approvals. However, sometimes managers do not need to be involved in the coding process. And one of the driving value propositions is we want this invoice to get through the approval cycle as fast as possible. So what we can do is they can actually get an email. The document can be attached. They can click on the links, approve or reject, right from their email. It's integrated with Doclink, and that'll push it off to the next stage in the workflow. And if there are mobile users, we also have a true mobile application that can achieve the same thing. Okay? Now, if we wanted them to sign in, right, they would sign in. Notice that I'm the CFO. I've got my CFO workflow queue here highlighted. Here's my document. I open it up. I do the approvals. I can add some notes. And then I'm going to be sending it back to AP. Now, notice the big difference here is that I'm the CFO, so I have limited ways in terms of who I can route it to, and that's all based on configuration as well. Right, so what we're doing is we're making sure that this invoice has been coded and completely approved before it's actually being vouchered into Sage. When it comes back to AP, here's some beautiful magic. What they can do is they can click the import button. Sorry, my mouse keeps floating away there. Here's the import button. And what happens, it is actually physically creating an unposted voucher in Sage. Right? So really, really giving you, you know, a nice mechanism of just bringing that transaction to Sage as well. And here we are back to, well, if I want to view the document in Sage, I just click on that View Documents button, and here it pops open for me. Okay. Now you do your normal posting routine, right? So that's not going to change. You do your normal posting routine, and then we're actually going to talk about the check capture. So that's really the next step in the process. I'm not going to take care of that. We've already talked about that. A little kind of preview, if you will, of that View Documents functionality. So that exists on all of these different screens, right? So that whole concept of clicking on the View Documents button and the document that relates to that transaction pops open, it's available in all these various areas. And that index button is here. Okay. Now, the check. This is really critical as well, because in a manual process, what people are doing is they're printing their check and they're, you know, taking a copy or printing a second copy, and they're attaching the remittance advice, you know, to that packet, and then they're filing it away. The time that's spent on that completely goes away. Based on the integration that we have, we're able to capture an image of the check, just like what you're seeing here on the screen. Plus, we're actually doing what's called an automatic index. That means we're capturing all of this information about this document as well. And then we even take it one step further, and this is a differentiator for us in the marketplace, which is we take that check number, right, and we apply it as a document property to the invoice. Why? Right? Because we are providing this really, really rich search criteria about all of these documents. So if I want to go and search for a whole disbursement packet, I could actually look it up by check number as well. Right? So now you're starting to hopefully see that whole concept of being able to have easy access to documents, That's the primary business value, and then it's about, all right, how do documents get in? Well, it depends on how they're produced. Email, automatic import. Hard copy, scan and index and push into workflow. We get the invoice approved, and then it's uploaded into Sage. All right. You ready to extend that kind of, learning even more? So
okay.
This is another kind of like cool area of the application that's pretty exciting. So when you roll out Paperless Office, Paperless Office already is going to be able to capture a fair amount of documents. But there's an implication, and that means is that if you want someone to look for that document, they would physically have to sign into Sage, go to Paperless Office, and drill into where those documents were saved. However, with Doclink, the way that we extend Paperless Office is that we actually capture the same kinds of documents, right? We push them into Doclink, and then that provides a little bit more of an easier way of being able to look for these documents and view them, all of course based on security. And my last customer, they said, you must highlight journals and registers because that's really powerful. So now I'm calling everyone's attention that we can also capture journals and registers, and that's really critical for people. Right? Store them in a centralized library for easy access. All right.
So that's an interesting point there. When you do a journal entry, do you have the ability to attach, let's say, a spreadsheet in the system to that entry so that you can, in audit, the auditor select that journal entry. You need to look for the support of how you calculated that entry, and a spreadsheet or a scan of a document is attached?
Yes, you can. Absolutely, and that's kind of part of that value proposition of any document can be brought into the system and stored, like an Excel worksheet. That's a perfect example, or some other kind of picture of a document. That's equally viable as well. If we're talking about JE entries, it's probably going to be some kind of worksheet and potentially some other supporting document that came in as well. Yeah, great point, and thank you for bringing that up. All right, so hopefully this is kind of like getting the, creative thought processes going in terms of, oh my gosh, I had no idea. I mean, I kind of get the concept it would be AP, but you didn't realize that maybe it was for all sorts of different, business documents, that exist in the organization. So here's like the sprinkles, right? So if we laid the foundation of just plain old good ice cream, and here's some sprinkles for you, because there is also the availability of doing what we call advanced business process tools. And we have another toolkit in our belt, if you will, that's called the Smart Form Toolkit. And what that allows for you to do is to replace any kind of paper-based document that you have in your organization, right? So if you say that your goal is to have as much as you can to have a paperless office, then we don't necessarily want paper-based forms floating through the office either, right? So this particular tool, you can create documents. You can do some advanced processing as well, and you kind of see that here on the screen. But I think the easiest way to explain the functionality is to kind of show you an example and talk about some really common uses, right? So if you told me, hey, Perry Lynn, you know what, we right now today get a credit card statement, and I have to physically cut that up and send it off to the approval cycle and then get that back, and then, and behind the scenes you're doing some offsetting entries, I would say let's look at the Smart Form Toolkit, because we can automatically pull in a CSV file from the bank, automatically chop that up by card holder and route it for the approval cycle, right? If you have forms that are attached to HR, onboarding, demographic change information, all of that can be brought into the system as well. And the cool thing here is that it's nice to know that you can satisfy any particular starting business requirement, and that may only require a subset of the modules. And then you can, of course, grow when the business needs and budget and time, make themselves available. So hopefully this kind of gives you a nice idea about, how to, all the different kinds of forms that you might be thinking about, using the SmartForm toolkit for. And so I thought we'd kind of go through what it might look like if I was to do an expense report. And then I think by understanding, hey, if I can do it with an expense report, then I can absolutely do it with, you fill in the blank of that document, right? So should be an easy way to submit an expense report, right? So with our mobile application, you can actually capture a picture of a receipt. So this is what I'm doing here. I'm adding the page, right? I've brought in the my airline ticket, right? And when I get back to the office, what I want to be able to do is to, in essence, upload it. But first, I'm going to add any pages that are required. I'm going to do some preliminary indexing because I want to give that document some meaning. And then I'm able to upload this into the actual SmartForm. And then what is happening here is that I am taking all of those entries and I'm physically using that information to push into an actual expense report. And this expense report is configurable. So I'm going to show you two different flavors. We don't mind what it looks like. It's all going to be about your preference and what you decide is important for the configuration. Right, so here's an example. And then we use the data that has been captured along with the actual physical receipt to physically create the expense report, and then off it goes through the workflow engine in order to get the approval. And then, of course, that's then uploaded into Sage as well. Okay, and then you can see everything down here. So this is really important, right? You've got your expense report, and also you have the expense receipt, so you could view those right here in workflow as well. Take this concept and say, well, hey, what about a purchase order-based invoice, where you've got a purchase order, a packing slip, and the invoice? Now you can more easily view those documents here for a visual match. Right? So really, really becomes so much more agile in the organization of being able to look for documents and view them. All right, so Paperless Plus. So the application is called Doclink, and there is a additional little product that we call Paperless Plus that is really Doclink for the Paperless Office application. And so I thought it might be kind of cool just to kind of say, well, why do it in the first place? And I think the big elements that I always think about is that you can capture all your paperless Office documents and make them easier accessible by all employees, whether or not that they're a Sage user. You can then extend that to kind of store any document in your organization in one central area, driven by security for easy access. Right? You can then use the power of workflow to not only route accounts payable documents, but think about other documents that travel in the organization. Although today we looked at approvals and coding and the automated import into Sage, of that voucher. And then I think overall it's really about, does your organization have a paperless vision, right? How does the paperless vision satisfy the strategic initiatives of the company, right? Growing without adding headcount, driving productivity and hard and soft dollar cost savings. And so those are kind of what I think as some of the big elements in terms of the why factor. And so what I wanted to do, at least for today, was to kind of offer up for you that if any of this made sense, then we could always talk about, what your vision is for going paperless. Where in the organization, right? Is it going to be accounting? Is it going to be somewhere else that you really needed to focus? And then we could talk about, what are you doing today? And then I could always present then a demonstration afterwards in terms of how Doclink would be able to help solve the business issues and help drive productivity gains and cost savings. So if you wanted to take that next step, then Sherry would be your girl. She can get that all set up for you. And it sounds like you have a couple projects that you're working on.
Yep, a couple. So kind of back to my first question there is, someone's sitting there and they have, that paper invoice, or even potentially sooner in that process that paper, shipping document from a vendor. So they're on the loading dock. They received the shipment. They have the paper shipper. They're going to do a goods receipt transaction. How do they take something that's paper-based? Do they do it within Sage? In the transaction, is there a button they can click to say, hey, I'm going to scan a document right now?
There is, but only on those two windows. So what they would normally do is, and there's two choices here. Number one is they're going to do the normal receiving transaction entry, right? And maybe they write the receiving number on the document. And then when they scan it in, they're going to go to this little section called index batch, and they're simply going to enter two values. They're going to say it's a packing slip, and they're going to enter the purchase number, right? And then what's going to happen is, because purchase order information is in Doclink, because we would have captured the purchase order already, right, automatically in Sage, it can go into Doclink or into Sage and pull forward additional values like vendor name and vendor number. Why? Because we're unifying these documents through all of those values. So that's one. Scan it, index it.
So they wouldn't necessarily scan the document at the time of doing the transaction then?
They could, but I think in that particular case, it would be easier to do after the fact scanning. Do all their transactions, put all their packing slips into the system at once, and then what would happen when they click on this index batch, you would see a listing of all the documents that have been scanned in.
Okay.
The first document would be highlighted and open, and then they just simply click packing slip, and they index PO number, click save. And when they click save, the next document in the queue is going to open up, and they would enter the next PO number and click save, and that's how they would do that indexing. So it would go pretty quick. If they did want, if you
go
ahead. Oh, there's another option, and depending on really the time delay between the doc and the receiving entry, and depending on how many staff, and depending on a couple other variables, it may actually make sense to have the doc scan the document and send it into the receiving workflow. And then what would happen is, let me actually grab a workflow engine really quick just to kind of help you with that concept. If we were to say, down here, let's just suggest that these are all receiving documents or packing slips, then they would be able to be looking at the packing slip on the screen and then physically do the entry from the packing slip on the screen. That may provide some benefit. So there's usually those two options. After the fact, or three options: scan at the doc, after the fact scanning, or have the doc scan it and push it into workflow to help facilitate the entry.
Okay.
And if you really want to get wild and crazy, we could even start introducing OCR, but I think that would be potentially overkill at this moment in time.
Well, I'd be highly interested in doing OCR because of the fact that it will eliminate the need to do entry. Now, we know OCR is not perfect, depending on the quality of the scan.
Right. Definitely a possibility, because you're right. What OCR brings to the table is eliminating data entry, because OCR is doing the data entry for you, right? And then
and it also makes the document itself searchable.
That's correct. And actually, our solution as well is moving into full text search also in the next release. So that's kind of another element of possibility.
Yeah, because obviously, a good majority of our invoices today come via email. Though there are still vendors who, either for whatever reason, send us hard copy invoices. Not that uncommon for the utility companies. Utility companies are great. They send you an email that tells you have a bill available, so you can go log in the portal and download them. It's really interesting. If you're a large company like us, that's just not one bill. It's like you get a bill for each meter you have. So I'm almost thinking for certain things it might be easier for us to just stick on paper and just drop them in a scanner. we have a lot of nice Fujitsu scanners laying around here that we currently use. Multi-page speed scanner, so that makes it really easy.
Okay.
And our QA side currently does use a document archiving program, but it's not, obviously it's not integrated with Sage. So we're kind of used to scanning stuff from a QA perspective. It's just not happening in accounting yet.
They could also bring, so whatever they're using, we could always look at, what are the documents that they're particularly saving.
Yeah, so they're using Docs Vault to save all of the COC, COAs, all of the internal testing results. They basically do a whole quality packet.
Okay. Do you, just out of curiosity, do you have to send, whenever I see or hear COC, COA, sometimes people have to physically send those documents with whatever kind of part or product that they're selling. Do you have to send those out?
Yes and no. So we send our own COA because we're the manufacturer, but we have to maintain all of those for all of the raw materials.
Do you know how you're doing it today? Like, is that a manual process?
So that's currently they have Docs Vault, so they scan all of those into Docs Vault, and if I'm not mistaken, they do have kind of a process in Docs Vault how they assemble, if you will, a package or a folder for every set of documents they need. Because a lot of our stuff has a COA, and then also we'll have a testing results because we still do a sample. Because we're in biotech and we do make stuff that goes into humans.
Well, here's what I'm thinking, just as a possibility, right? So remember we talked.
That's the reason we probably have a good 30-plus Fujitsu scanners on people's desks around here.
Right, yeah, no doubt. Oh my gosh. Well, just so you know, right, we could actually scan in those documents or bring them in some other methodology, right? Doesn't need to be scanning. But what I'm thinking is that our output automation tool can basically, based on configuration, it says, all right, if I'm sending, I'm just going to use AR invoice, right? I'm sending an invoice out to a customer. Or I'm sending a part and a particular document has been configured such that whenever I send that part out, you must also send the testing results and the COA. So two things can kind of happen. Either, number one, you can have an email configured to automatically grab the appropriate documents and send them out all together. Or number two, you can have those documents sent in an orderly fashion to a particular printer because you have an obligation to physically send those documents. So you may have that already taken care of, and it sounds like you do, but just know that's another area. So if you wanted to unify on one product, you could certainly do that. We could talk to the quality control people, and so then it'd be about, okay, well then how much maintenance are you spending on that other solution? And would it make sense, because to invest in the modules to have one single solution for the entire company, remembering, of course, all different.
Yeah, it may or may not. I think my interest right now is in accounting, and the nice thing is, from an accounting perspective, that's one department making a decision. You start making this broad decision to get started, then it becomes kind of a political nightmare. And if you will, and our quality function here views that they have oversight over the entire business. So you start talking anything that might touch their quality stuff, and then I've already noticed they get very upset even when you suggest changing a procedure.
Mom's the word.
So this company went from being a privately held, closely held company to being bought by a private equity group last year, and now they're for the first time ever being audited under U.S. GAAP, and the need to and the business is growing exponentially. So my concern is on the accounting side is how do we get a higher level of accuracy, better documentation, retention of the documentation, and gain some efficiencies. So how do we do more in less time?
Right.
Really what I'm looking at.
Okay, got it. And you've touched on all the strategic elements then, because it is about higher accuracy. How do we achieve higher accuracy? Because we can either, number one, use OCR to scrape data, which is pretty good, especially when you get those email-based invoices, or number two, PO-based invoices, we're repurposing data. And there's a ton of other kinds of little tips and tricks, like using templates so that people aren't always choosing GL account codes, but they're, selecting the default related to the vendor. And of course, you're doing import, and you're making sure that the control process is in place. So I think that's huge. And then I would imagine that as the company continues to grow, there's going to be a time where you're going to have to start hiring people to keep up with the volume. If you've invested in technology, then you should be able to certainly do more with less, right? Because it is a streamlined.
Yeah, exactly. Your scaling ratio changes.
Right, exactly. All right.
I mean, it's not. Yeah, so I mean, the biggest things is, obviously for us is going to be, kind of the stuff. You hit the nail on the head with the AP. That's a really important area. The other area is being able to do a electronic workflow routing for approval of, invoices that aren't supported by a PO. The ability to, kind of archive this information indefinitely, if you will, electronically. Really that viewpoint there of here's the PO, here's the vendor's invoice, and here's the check that paid it. That's 3 of the 4 documents that we get in testing. The other one is the the vendor shipper or bill of lading that we received because of course auditors are always worried about accrual, and if we had proper timing of the entry of receiving goods.
Right. So just so you know as well, there's a full audit trail on the document, and one of my
customers take it from security, you can make it to where people can't delete documents, but you could give them rights to put one of those sticky notes on it, but they could change the document coding, but they can't say, oh, what, I just want to delete this transaction. So that, the rank and file, if you will, are limited in the potential damage they could do.
You nailed it, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of some great stuff here. I like the example of, splitting up the credit card statements, and routing them, kind of, I envision that just like the expense reports, if you took a corporate credit card statement, we have separate, our statement, we get one continuous statement, but it's broken down by card holder. But I'm envisioning when you do that workflow, you route it to the employee, they can attach scans of all the receipts that tie to that charge.
Yes, exactly.
And then code them. And then it can route to their supervisor for review and approval that everything is kosher, if you will, and then back over to accounting. Like right now, we do that manually. It takes time. It's not impossible to do, but it would be nice to have kind of a nice little workflow, if you will. And it does kind of eliminate the problem of whose initials signed off on that.
Yes, because then it's more decipherable rather than someone's chicken on the document.
I've already brought that up with I know our QA department has problems with that too because they run around sometimes on other documents, not accounting documents. And I came from an aerospace background. I'm used to everyone having a quality stamp. It's hooked on their keychain. It has a specific number. and initials, and they have an ink pad and they stamp everything. They don't initial it by hand because that very problem. But something like electronic workflow like this works. I like it also for some of the forms. So things like new employee onboarding is a good example. or master data changes. So, you know, we're talking about creating forms for things like modifying or creating a new item in the item master, creating a new customer code, a new vendor code, those kind of things, and having an electronic workflow as opposed to a paper-based workflow.
Yes, you've nailed it. Well, Jason, you totally get the gold star because you get the concepts and you're able to easily relate it to your business. So I think the big thing is you tell me when you're ready to go through, you know, an investigation process, you know, with the intent of selecting a product, and then we'll support you 100%.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure you hit the nail on the head. Is we're right now in the midst of testing upgrade to 2017, so we're on a current platform, and then it's going to be about, you know, what kind of integrations and kind of enhancements we can bolt on to make life easier.
Right, exactly. Well, best wishes to you. I mean, it sounds like you've got a lot on your plate, and I think that you're on the right path, you know, by all stretches, you know, to get everything running as seamless as possible.
Yep.
And get ready for explosive growth. All right. Well, then that's it for today. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time to participate. And just, you know, let Sherry know when you're ready, and then we can go from there.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. Terry Lynn, thank you as always. Excellent presentation, great product. And Jason, thank you for being the one person in my world who signs up for a webinar and actually shows up for a webinar. So thank you very, very much. Everyone have a wonderful day. Jason, if you need anything, feel free to reach out.
Sounds good. Thanks.
You're welcome. Goodbye.